how do you start a video about Lost? No, seriously, I'm struggling here. How do I start this thing?
Stop being such a little bit.
Back in the day, Lost was the show that people talked about. Everybody was watching it. It was high concept, well filmed, serialized. It was basically like an HBO show, but for cable TV. And while that kind of thing is pretty common today, there was nothing else like it at the time. And as a result, it quickly turned into a mini cultural phenomenon. TV shows were referencing it, forums were dissecting every frame. Hell, my first time watching Lost was in my 10th grade English class because my teacher said it was relevant to Lord of the Flies. Was that true? Not really, but the point is that the show was everywhere you went back in the day. And naturally, with all that exposure to people being excited about Lost, I got swept up into the hype and started watching it too. And of course, I immediately loved it. The show had everything. Great characters, great mysteries, people getting knocked out from just one hit.
What's this?
Out of here safely.
Oh, hey, Anna.
But about 2 years after I started watching Lost, I kinda thought it sucked. I could barely get through episodes. And by its final season, I was so done with it that when the series finale finally aired, I was actually in such a good mood that everybody I talked to that night kept asking me if I was on drugs. Of course, I wasn't on anything. I was just really happy to know that Lost was finally over and that I never had to watch it again. True story, by the way. But it wasn't just me. Everybody else seemed to fall out of love with the show too. It was crazy how fast the change in sentiment happened. In 2004, Lost was the greatest thing to hit cable TV. By 2010, calling Lost a bad show was popular opinion, and its ending was considered to be one of the biggest train wrecks of all time. So, what changed? Well, it all starts with a little story that I like to call a lost audience. You know, because the show's name is... Okay. So sit down, scooch closer, don't make me ask you again with the scooching, and listen up. Because it all started sometime around 2004, probably. The popularity of Survivor and the Tom Hanks film Castaway inspired the head of ABC to create their own Lost at Sea themed TV series, which would be known as Lost. And they chose J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof to write the pilot script for that series. Now, Damon and J.J. were sneaky little bastards, so even though the network just wanted an episodic show like Law & Order, they decided to write a pilot for a serialized show instead and just lied to the network about it. Because apparently they just really didn't give a about the execs. But lucky for them, the execs weren't paying very close attention and gave Lost the green light anyways. And the rest was history. Lost was officially picked up for a pilot episode later that year. Fun fact, it ended up being ABC's most expensive pilot ever, running the network over $10 million what they usually spend on new pilots. In fact, it was so expensive that the head of ABC, who spearheaded the creation of Lost, was fired. And that's funny because later that year, the pilot aired and the show was an instant commercial and critical success. So dude was basically fired for making a great decision. Because the pilot was so successful, it didn't matter that the episode clearly wasn't designed to be a contained story like the execs were promised, because all they could hear in their heads was, "We're in the money, we're in the money." So Lost was off to a great start. It had fantastic characters, a strong premise, a solid format for storytelling, but there was just one problem. That lie that J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof told the network execs was about to bite them in the ass. See, Lost was a show that thrived on its characters and its mysteries. It set up so much intrigue about both the island and the survivors that fans couldn't wait until the next week to find out more. But ABC had no intention of giving the viewers what they wanted. Because even though the show started down a serialized path, they kept trying to force it to be more episodic. They didn't care if the show was actually good. They just cared that people were tuning in so they could keep hearing the sound every time another episode aired. And that might sound stupid today, because it is. But you also have to understand that that's how all cable shows worked back then. They were cash cows designed to run forever and make the networks as much money as possible. Today we live in a post-Breaking Bad world where it's the norm for shows to be on the same level as movies. But back in 2004, Lost was the first of its kind. And audiences loved it, but networks had no idea what to do with it. And that divide between the showrunners and the executives really up the first 3 seasons of the show. It forced the writers to add filler and make up irrelevant storylines that don't go anywhere, just so that the show could spin its wheels and draw out the story for as long as possible.
I was just reading your tattoos. You do know what it says. Your tattoos, that's what they say.
A lot of the hate that people had for Lost started with this problem, because it made the show so boring to watch. And Lost has all these cool mysteries and storylines that are always going on. So when you have all that and people still think your show is boring anyways, you gotta be doing something wrong. Oh, hey, that's a cool character. Kind of like a little girlfriend for Hurley. She'll probably get some good storylines with it. Oh, okay. Oh, hey, that's a cool character. Kind of like an aggressive cop type girl. I'm sure we'll get some cool storylines with her. You know, I'd be mad, but Ana Lucia kind of sucked anyways. This problem between ABC and the showrunners hit seasons 2 and 3 the hardest. In fact, I'd say that anecdotally, most people I know stopped watching Lost around season 3 because of how badly it was dragging. But just when things were looking hopeless,
Your tattoos. That's what they say.
a miracle happened. Turns out that the head writers of Lost actually have massive nutsacks, just the largest, toughest scrotums you've ever imagined. And a few episodes into season 3, they told the network execs that they'd be leaving the show unless they got a confirmed end date for the series. Now the crybabies over at ABC immediately started shitting their diapers when they heard that, because Lost was their most profitable show. They needed people to keep watching. And the first few episodes of season 3 did not make audiences happy. And it was directly because of the wheel spinning. So without any other choice, they caved. And just like that, Lost was officially going to end in 3 more seasons. And now that the head writers weren't forced to cram filler into every episode, the show went into overdrive and delivered its best run of episodes for the next few years. Now you guys are smart, you've been paying attention, so I know you're probably wondering why Lost was still hated in the end if it got better after the ending was negotiated. And that's a great question. But the answer is that I don't know, I'm just some YouTube guy. I don't actually have the answers here, people, but I do have a theory. I think the reason is that Lost made a giant blunder with its marketing. See, Lost is a show that deals with a lot of paranormal, supernatural stuff that just couldn't happen in real life, which is pretty obvious from the moment you're introduced to the smoke monster thing that lives in the jungle. But when the show was blowing up in popularity, for some reason, the head writers kept insisting that the answer to all of the island's mysteries would be grounded in real-world explanations. Now, like I said before, these guys were sneaky bastards, and we've seen that they have a history of lying about the show already, so it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that those claims were bullshit. But that lie set the audience up with false expectations for how the show and its many mysteries would work, which meant that for the audience, all of their theories for the show revolved around the idea that the answers would not be supernatural, which of course is just not at all how things played out, and it left people pretty pissed. It also apparently left viewers confused, because to this day people still seem to think that the island was purgatory. It's not. So I guess you could say that a lot of the show's hate came from dumb decisions made in the name of making money. Mainly 2 stupid, big mistakes. And it's not to say that the show doesn't have its problems, because it does. Across the Sea? That ain't Pickerton. But what's interesting is that in recent years, Lost has made a bit of a rebound in its public perception. The hate has quietly died down and been replaced by a new generation of praise. And I think I know exactly why that happened. For starters, when people pick up Lost today, they can just binge the show at their own pace. Plot slows down in season 2 and 3? No problem, just blast through it. That's how people watch TV these days anyways. I mean, let's be real, half of you degenerates could probably do 20 episodes in less than a week. And the other reason is that it's been a long enough time since the old marketing campaigns and interviews came out that people getting into Lost today aren't expecting a scientific explanation for everything that happens. They kind of just take it as it comes along, which makes the supernatural elements of the show feel more organic. Yeah, sure, things could still be better, but without the overblown expectations. The finale of the show doesn't end up being this giant letdown like it was in 2010. And I'd know that better than anyone, because as I said in the beginning of this video, I used to be a Lost hater too. But what I didn't tell you was that I fell back in love with the show when I decided to rewatch it in 2020. I'm a born-again Lost fan, baby. And now when I watch the finale, I cry like a little bitch. And what changed everything for me was that instead of focusing exclusively on the island's mythology and puzzles, like I did the first time around, I focused more on the characters. And as it turns out, that's what the show has actually been about this whole time. I mean, duh, it sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but goddammit, it's true. The TV show is about its characters. Even the format of the show is set up that way. The main focus of each episode is told through flashbacks where we get to see important moments in these characters' lives. Like seriously, how did I not get that the first time around? Also, maybe this is a hot take, but the show being held back and forced to spin its wheels by the network kind of helps reinforce the audience's relationship with the characters. Because in the first half of the show, before the end date was negotiated, Lost spent a lot of time just hanging out on the beach with those characters. Whether it was intentional intentional or not, it really helps the viewers build a relationship with the survivors, because they get to spend so much time learning about them before things really kick into overdrive. So when the series finale comes around, then it focuses more on a satisfying end for the characters than the mysteries. It still hits. It gives the show a sense of completion that no solved mystery ever could, which is sort of like a cool, unintended consequence of the network sucking so much dick. And also, are we just not going to talk about how Lost is basically an anime? Like, it pretty much follows the shonen anime format to a T. You got your basic heroes, they're all dealing with some pretty basic stuff in the beginning, things start to ramp up like crazy, and before you know it, you got people with superpowers fighting in spectacular settings to stop evil from spreading out into the world. Lost is an anime, guys. And I don't care if you easily dismantle my argument. This is an arbitrary hill that I'll die on. What are you gonna do, cry? You gonna stop watching the video? Please don't stop watching, I need the money. All right, let's wrap up this bad boy. Now, this is usually the part of the video where I go full Kyle Broflovsky mode and talk about what I learned today, so here that goes, I guess. I think the big takeaway here is that Lost is in every way a product of its time. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's go with that. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense. People were captivated by Lost because it was the first cable show of its kind. It was limited by the network for not fitting into old TV formats. And it was met with disappointment because of the misleading marketing campaigns that coincided with its release. If the show had started today, it probably wouldn't have gone down in the same way. That was unique to the circumstances that surrounded it. But despite all of its shortcomings, Lost still has new fans falling in love with it for the first time today. And I think the only reason that that's been possible is because at its core, it's timeless.